I'm doing stuff for Substack, and I've written 3 or 4 articles. One of them was to make the point that when I write about Norway being involved, that there was a long history of the Norwegian Navy and also the shipping companies from Norway being deeply available to us for secret operations, even in Vietnam as early as 1950, 63, 64. They were working with us, sending spies and agents into North Vietnam. One day, one reporter might ask the White House, since the president, as the commander in chief of the United States and also the head of everything in the government, he can use the word that the word of art is tasking. He can task the American intelligence community. The CIA has an intelligence directive. The military has an intelligence service. There's something called the Office of National Intelligence, which is the supervisory of all, has a special intelligence unit. Task them to do a big study and find out who actually did it, because we have all the assets. We have signals intelligence, we can intercept, we can do anything. Well, of course, if you ask that question, you might not be allowed to ask any more questions in the White House, which is one reason the whole business of being assigned to a beat reporter is crazy. But you certainly won't get an answer, because the answer is they've not asked anybody. Why haven't they asked? Because they know the story. So I have very good reason to believe, more than very good reason. So I have empirical stuff, but I can't make it public. I can't embarrass anybody. They all knew who did it. I mean, who else would have done it? Really, a group of Ukrainians with a fake passport renting a $500,000 yacht or $1 million yacht. You really think somebody with a fake passport can do that? I mean, the story is just so ridiculous that they put out, but it's fallen away. Although they had a lot of hope for it in the White House, I thought. It makes me sad that my old newspaper, the New York Times, which I worked for 7 or 8 years, in which I wrote all kinds of stories about the CIA, negative stories, being involved in the overthrow of Allende, spying on American citizens, etc. I probably wrote, I don't know, I guess 800 stories in my 7, 8 years there. And I think maybe 5 or 6 had a named source. Unnamed sources is the only way you can write a story from inside the American government. Nobody wants to be named, but they don't mind telling the truth if they can get away with not being blamed. But it doesn't matter what my record is. It doesn't matter what I think. I've written a story and we'll see what happens. That's all. We went into the war in Vietnam because of the containment theory that we developed after World War II. We just won a war with the help of the Soviet Union, which lost 20 million soldiers during the war. We lost not even 1/20th that many. But one war is too. I'm not minimizing anybody who died in the American war, over 400,000. But 20 million is a lot of people, and we really found it very hard to ever acknowledge, the Russian involvement. We celebrate D-Day when we invaded Germany, but there were many days like that for the Soviet Union then. Nothing's changed, is what I'm saying. And unfortunately, the papers that I worked for, the New Yorker magazine too, which I worked for many years and very happily, so with the New York Times, are the only reason I think they are the way they are is a fear of another Republican who's very right-wing, because there's no question Trump was very damaging to America. So they're blindly supporting Biden in this madness. So there's so much we don't know in that White House, what they're thinking. And so far, to me and many other Americans, they haven't demonstrated much wisdom. Mr. Ted Postal is one of those people, if you get interested in something, you're going to get, 30 pages of email. He gave me a long account of what's possible. And it turned out one of the methods he thought was possible was in fact the method that was used, a very simple method. You have, and by the way, the notion that four or five people in a yacht, the story that was put out the other week that the German press jumped on. I think the German intelligence agency BND put out the story with the help of they've touched base with our CIA on it. I have the same level of professional people backing me up and go through the same standard, but I'm publishing for myself in this amazing place called Substack, which gives me one advantage. I have the same standards, but I don't have to deal with the insane editors we have today who are putting out this crap they put out. I mean, how could they do the story they did? The story that was published by my old newspaper about that yacht met no professional standard that I know of. In America, when you sign up as an officer in the State Department or in the government, you have to take an oath of loyalty. It's not to your boss. It's not to the colonel. It's not to the general. It's not to the president. It's to the Constitution. And that's what they see. And the government's full of people who want to do the job right. And sometimes I make it easy for them. When they can't do it the right way, they talk to me. I think this White House is going to want to deny the story as long as possible. And I think even if my old newspaper, the New York Times, came out with the story basically confirming everything I said, they'd still deny it. Since 1962, the American government has been very hostile, more than hostile, terrified of the large amounts of cheap Russian gas and oil that was being sold to Germany and Western Europe, our allies. And they always saw that in the Kennedy days even as weaponizing gas. And that's been the argument they've made against it. And when Joe Biden was vice president on behalf of Obama, he made that argument too. I quoted a speech he made with the precise argument that everybody had made for, by that time, 92, 30 years, 3 decades more. He made it just in 2014, 5 decades. The same argument that Russia is using gas as a weapon, a political weapon. And so Biden knew all there was to know about pipelines. The whole point of this is that Biden, in the fall of last year, in late September, for reasons I don't really know, I think the war wasn't going well, and he was worried about getting more funding for the war in Ukraine from Western Europe, and particularly from Germany. Germany has a long history of after World War II. Mm-hmm. I mean, could you imagine what it was like after World War II? They're in Western Europe with countries that they've been bombing and murdering and raping in for 10 years. I mean, it was very hard for France to take them into NATO. But they eventually did what they did. They became good neighbors. They used the gas they were getting from Europe and the oil to become a productive company. They made trade with Europe on good terms, and they won their way back into good graces. But Biden was worried that the Germans would not keep on supporting the war in Ukraine, particularly by late September of last year. It certainly looked like a quagmire. Nobody was going to win. We're in this terrible mess. I don't trust the president. I don't trust Mr. Blinken. I don't trust Sullivan. I don't trust the Undersecretary of State, Victoria Nuland. I don't trust them because they're instinctively, viscerally anti-communist. They're exactly as George Ball was writing about in the Reagan period. Here we are. I've been doing this for a lot of time. They're not going to bother me. I don't care if they listen to my conversations. I don't say anything that's I'm doing my job. You can't put me in jail for doing my job. And and so I'm just going to keep on writing and see what happens. Yep. And I don't think this is heroic. I'm actually tired.